I have gone by a variety of titles, and those include photographer, artist, filmmaker, curator, and one that perhaps embodies them all, which is impatient dreamer. But the one I hold most to heart is founder. I am the founder of Blitz. Blitz is a non-profit organization and contemporary art space, and it's located in the heart of Valletta. When we think of laying foundations, at least architecturally, I suppose we think of laying the first layer of something that will rise in a perhaps linear and perpendicular fashion, especially nowadays, not being short of controversy about soulless buildings going upwards, and upwards, and upwards, and upwards, and on, and on. However, when I think of my own practice, and whether that is my artistic practice, my research interests, or even the founding of Blitz, I realize that there is no such thing as linearity in my process, and surely no linearity in my thoughts. And very often, I actually doubt if there's ever any logic to both those parts of me. And so my task for today will be to talk about non-linearity in a little bit kind of narrative and structured way. Otherwise, obviously, you will not be able to follow anything I say, so wish me luck. And so the running thread of my talk will be the rhizome. Someone very, very dear to me has pointed out on numerous occasions that I use the words rhizome and rhizomatic a little bit too often. So guilty as charged. But I must admit that this word, rhizome, is somehow a word which I'm very attached to, if you can be attached to a word, for the simple reason that I feel that it embodies my mind, it embodies the way I work, it embodies my process, it embodies perhaps my very being. A rhizome, by definition, has no beginning and no end. It is a way of thinking that's based on the ideas described by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari. By definition, a rhizome, which is also referred to as a subterranean stem, is a stem of a plant that shoots roots, that shoots and sends out roots as it grows. It is used by Deleuze and Guattari to describe the multiplicity, interconnectivity, and self-replicating nature of ideas. They maintain, and I quote, that a rhizome may be broken, shattered even, at a given spot, but it will rise up again, either on one of its old lines or on a new line. Let's take cartography as an example. So picture a map. It just looks like one big entangled mass of lines and curves, sometimes intersecting, deviating, crossing at other points. Taken as a whole, the map has no beginning, it has no end, it's got no introduction, it's got no conclusion, there's no big red arrow saying start here. You pick your own starting point, and depending where you want to go, you simply follow through to your desired destination, if you even have one in the first place. Also, everybody has rituals of some kind. And these rituals, especially when they're related to the creative process, tend to relate to the beginning of something. So some people need to perhaps start early in the day, others are night owls, some procrastinate until it's too late and thrive under this epic pressure. I don't think I fit neatly into any of those categories, and perhaps I'm sometimes one and sometimes the other. But I do actually have one very, very particular step in my process. And I guess it's no surprise that this is not something which happens at the beginning. But this, I've come to realize, perhaps more as time goes by, is that at some point in my process, in any project I'm working on, I suddenly get this nagging feeling of wanting to walk away. Almost always. And I have yet to understand if this actually comes from a fear of failure, or perhaps, maybe more plausible, it's more related to a trait that I mentioned at the very beginning, my terrible, terrible impatience. And this actually is a very, very crucial part of my process, because going back to the notion of rhizomes and things being rhizomatic, if I can compare it, it is the time when the rhizome snaps and shoots off into another direction, and shoots off with a renewed thought and renewed energy, perhaps. When I was invited to be part of this event, I was immediately attracted to this theme of curating curiosity. In any introduction to Blitz, whether that is an introductory text or in conversation, I very often asked, but what is Blitz exactly? In any start off to talking about it or describing it, it's always described as a place for the creative and the curious. And as time goes by, and inevitably keeps doing so, I'm always looking at other projects, other contemporary art galleries, other spaces, other organizations around the world, learning from them, growing, modifying, experimenting. But at its heart, Blitz always remains two things. Firstly, it is a space that's open to all contemporary art forms, but very specifically as a reflection of contemporary existence. And secondly, a space for the creative and the curious. And the more I talk about it, the more I understand how personal this actually is. Because in a strange way, I like to think that, well, when I talk about this and I realize how personal those two things are, I realize how intricately connected my heart and Blitz's heart is. Because somehow I believe that somewhere in the building, Blitz actually has a heart hidden in one of the rooms, possibly the one remaining room I haven't fixed and restored. So, I feel that there is this connection between our two hearts, because it is very similar to this rhizome that I am speaking about. And I believe that rhizomes, in fact, do not only exist in the present, but they have the ability to transcend space and time. And while we are on the subject of hearts and space and time, I would like to talk a little bit about those special rhizomes that do in fact transcend this notion of time. Those precious moments where the past and the present come together to lay those foundations for a potentially beautiful future. The building, which today is known as Blitz, has been in my family for 3 generations. The house was my grandparents' home. It is the place where they brought up their 6 children. These are 4 of the 6 children. The other 2 weren't born yet. The little girl at the end is my mother. Her engagement party in January 1963 was held in the house. Her dress was a champagne color, and her shoes were gold. The carpet in that room now is in the Carmelite church, which is just round the corner from the house. It was donated to the church when my grandfather passed away. He was a very devout man, and the Carmelite church was his favorite church in Valletta. 2 years after that engagement, again in January, but 1965, and at the age of 20, my mother got married. And this is her with her mother, my grandmother, getting ready for her wedding in that very same house. Any of you who have been in Blitz, that is the pink room, which obviously you cannot see in black and white pictures. But that is the very same house, and that is the very same room. When recently looking at the photos again, my mom said she wished she was smiling more. But she also jokingly said that perhaps she was already feeling the weight of marriage, or perhaps the weight of the troublesome 3 kids that were about to come along. At the time, she had warned her dressmaker over and over again not to make anything fussy. The dressmaker said, "You're so skinny, you should have a bigger skirt." No. She refused. She wanted the plainest dress possible. Eventually, the children that grew up in the house had their own children. And I am the youngest grandchild. Pictured there, I wasn't even 2 years old. And shortly after that, my grandparents moved out of Valletta. And then the building stood empty for over 30 years, until around 8 years ago, when I started the arduous task, and perhaps at the time pretty much insane, of bringing it back to life. My parents today admit that then they thought I was nuts. Nowadays, but they've only told me now. Halfway through, I was presented with an unexpected opportunity in London. And again, my path was shot off into a very, very different direction. And so, at that time, in that case, I did actually walk away. And at the time, I thought the project was terminated. Experience and hindsight, of course, now tells me that it was in fact just paused. The rhizome defies traditional, rational, and logical approach. And although it may be broken, completely shattered, at any given spot, it may start up on one of its old lines. And I think there is absolutely no better way to describe my decision to move back home from London, to pick up where I left off, and to finally finish the restoration, and to create Blitz. And so Blitz will turn 4 this year. I'm also immensely privileged that my family is also irrational enough not to cash in and sell the Blitz building on the premise of another boutique hotel in Valletta. I have absolutely no memories of the domestic history of this house, other than those that I have created myself in my adult life. Yet, I know every corner of this building as if I've known it all my life. Thank you. Thank you.